When State House announced yesterday that President Uhuru Kenyatta was going to address the nation at 4 p.m., Kenyans were anxious to hear the message the president had for the country. And indeed, most Kenyans were glued to their TV. And when the president's convoy left State House for Harambee House, Kenyans were quick to point out three things. Number one, they noted that the vehicle carrying President Uhuru Kenyatta didn't have a flag. Kenyans are used to seeing the presidential motorcade with a flag. But yesterday they observed those who were between State House to Harambee House noted that there was no flag. And they started asking themselves several questions. They also observed that the vehicle carrying the president had its number plate upside down. And Kenyans easily concluded that maybe the president was in a hurry, or the person who was fixing the plates was in a hurry and they forgot. And number three, they also observed that when the president arrived at Harambee House, there were no handshakes. And indeed, even when Fred Okengo Matiang'i first arrived, there were no handshakes. So today I want us to look at why the president's vehicle had the number plate upside down and where there were no flags. But before we do that, if you are bumping on this video for the first time, I want you to take a second or two and hit the subscribe button so that next time we produce a video like this one, then you get notified. Now back to the main issue. When the president arrived at at Harambee House yesterday, earlier, Fred Okengo Matiang'i had also arrived, but there were no handshakes. Now, when Fred Okengo Matiang'i first arrived at Harambee House, and again when the president arrived and there were no handshakes, it was clear the main motive of that particular meeting. The president had a message for the country regarding the pandemic virus. And indeed, he announced two more cases. And he announced a raft of measures which we are going to look at into details. Basically, we are going to look at the president's speech, those measures, whether they're going to work or not. But the two things which Kenyans observed were very clear. Number one, the president's vehicle didn't have the flag. And I've looked around and I've done a bit of research, and I've realized that anytime the president's vehicle has its number plate upside down, then it cannot have the flag. So which means the people handling the president decided not to have the flag, but to have the number plate upside down. And that's why it didn't have the flag. But why was the number plate upside down? It's normally when the president has a bad news for the country, or when the country is headed in the wrong direction. And yesterday, the president had a bad news or bad message for the country. That's why the number plate was upside down. It's not because of what most Kenyans were trying to say. So the president had bad news for the country. Because look at it. You are the president of the Republic of Kenya. Then you want to announce to them that there's a pandemic virus in the country. Then you announce draft of measures which basically locks down the country. Kenya is at lockdown today. Schools have been closed. People have not gone to work. The president even advised Kenyans to use mobile money transfers for payment just to reduce the risk. So the president didn't have any good news. And that's why the number plate was put upside down. I think that's now very clear. Let me try and explain to you guys in details the measures which the president announced yesterday. There are around 9. I've condensed them to around 9. Number 1, the president is saying travel from any countries with any case of coronavirus restricted. So if you want to go to any country where there is coronavirus, that movement is going to be restricted, at least for the next 30 days. Which I think is okay, because let's say you are going to China or you are going to United States of America, because it's now clear that United States of America could even be having more cases than China, but they are heading. So assuming you are going to the United States for a week, then you come back, then chances of getting infections are so high. So the government is restricting that, which I fully support. Let us restrict the movement just for 30 days. Number 2, the other measures they put is that only Kenyan citizens allowed back with self-quarantine or government-designated facility in effect for 30 days in government-designated facilities. So it means if you are a Kenyan and you are stuck somewhere in China, I don't know why the government has refused to bring Kenyans from China to the country. Because now they have isolation centers. So the government is saying, if you are in a Kenyan and you are outside the country, then you'll be allowed to come back into the country. But once you come back, you'll be subjected to a procedure, isolation procedure. So you'll be isolated for sometimes maybe two weeks or maybe 1 month. Then you'll be released now to go back. So I think that's also something which I agree with fully. There's no Kenyans who should be stuck outside the country because of this virus. Number three is saying all who arrive within the last 14 days must self-quarantine. And I have a problem with that. The Kenyan government knew more than 2 weeks ago that this pandemic was here with us. They still went ahead and allowed a Chinese plane with over 239 passengers on board to land into the country. They didn't even bother to isolate these people. In fact, at some point I was reading that they could not even trace some of these people. China is a high-risk country. From that time, Kenyans were so much concerned about planes coming from China. What about the planes which came from other countries? How are they going to be traced? Because I'm suspecting those are some of the planes carrying these people. Because as today, the first case came from United States of America. The 2 cases, I don't know where they came from. But the first case had contact with several other people, and already they quarantined around 21 people who had direct contact with that particular passenger. So I think it's okay, but how are they going to trace some of these people? How are they going to trace some of these people? Some people even came to the airport but didn't leave because they were connecting. So how are we going to trace all this? But I think for our own security, what these particular victims should do, if you travel into the country and you value your country, then just go for this test. Then if possible, just quarantine. Because I'm foreseeing a situation where in the next 2 or some few days, we are going to have more cases, because of that failure by the government to put some of these measures which they are now putting right now. Number 4, all schools close with the immediate effect. These schools close from tomorrow, which is today. Boarding schools by 18th March, colleges by 20th March. I had a different idea, but I've also read what people are thinking. Schools should be closed. But does it make sense to close boarding schools? Because in my view, if boarding schools will be closed by 18th, then we are going to have a lot of transport between that 18th from all parts of the country. For example, if you come from Nyanza, you come from Western, you come from Rift Valley, and you study in Nairobi. then it means all these guys will have to look for various transports to these respective areas. So my thinking was that the government would have insisted that boarding schools remained in boarding schools. But then they take measures to prevent any further infections, so that access to those schools were going to be restricted. How students were going to be fed in those schools were going to be restricted, because it was going to be very easy for the schools to put on these measures, like for example, ensuring that people who are cooking for these kids, people who are serving them food, people who are any other thing is restricted. Provide sanitizers for them. Make sure access to the schools are restricted. But I've been reading one of the concerns of the parents, or maybe there's the concerns of others, is that if these students were allowed in schools, where were they going to get supplies? And again, if they were allowed to stay in school, they were going to have an advantage over the day scholars. And the other reason I've read, which most people are raising, and I remember one of my cousins posting on her wall, that her kid already called her, asking her to go for her, even before the government announced this, to go pick her from school because of coronavirus. Remember, this is a kid who is in boarding school and already knows there's a virus called coronavirus, and most of them fear, so they'd rather be close to their parents. So probably the government must have considered all those factors, and that's why they decided to close the schools, including boarding schools. I don't know what you think, but on this one, I really want to hear your opinion. What do you think? Do you think the government ought to have allowed boardings to be closed, or just to remain opened? Let me hear your opinion on that. On that one, I still have a different opinion. I think they should have just remained, maybe for a month, or maybe for 2 weeks. Then we monitor. But the other challenge is, if an infection arises in school, how are they going to manage it? Number 5, government and businesses encouraged to have people work from home, except essential services. On this, I fully support. On this one, I fully support. Let people work from home. But again, you can't tell people to work from home while places like Kibuye, Kikomba, and all these major markets, people are operating as if nothing is happening. So the government must ensure that as much as people are staying at home, then other places are restricted. And as a matter of fact, the other thing which we must know as Kenyans, that it begins with you. It's you who can prevent this thing from you. It's not the government. The requirement is wash your hands. So it's upon you to ensure that every time you wash your hand. The other thing is that you should avoid crowded places. It's up to you. So kama unataka kwenda kukunywa pombe, go ahead. But the government has said that you should avoid crowded places. Then there is this 1 meter radius. So make sure that whenever you are, you keep that distance from people. When you sneeze, elbow. So it begins with you, not with any other person. But the government should actually ensure that some of these laws are enforced, because as much as people are not going to work, but there are people who are going to Kibuye, there are people who are going to Kikomba, there are people who are going to Kongowea. And you know, some of these people end up supplying big hotels, they end up supplying small hotels. They are going to supply the ordinary kibanda, mama mboga, mama wanyanya. So you can see the risk. So I think there's a way the government can try and, at least, if you put the country in lockdown, it would be impossible. Kenyans are not prepared. The other thing, encourage cashless transaction over cash. Cost of transactions to be reduced. The government is planning to encourage people who are to me M-Pesa. But Kenyans are asking. Most of them, they don't even have that money. They don't have the money. So they normally go out there, they work, wanakuja na 100 bob per day, or they go work, okay. So they don't have the money. So how do you expect them to use M-Pesa? How? So lazima wataenda huko wafanye kazi, wapewe hiyo yao, waende kwa mama mboga, wewe anataka mboga, waende kwa but if you can afford to avoid using money, cash, I think it's good. Because this thing is spread in a very funny way. So if you can avoid contact with money, money should not be your friend at this moment. Make money your enemy. If you have cash, make it your enemy. Kuna zingine nilitoka kwa M-Pesa, I don't know, kwa bank yesterday. Yeah? Sijui nimeziweka wapi. So make money to be your enemy. Let them not be your friend at this hour. So kama uko na pesa, hold on to it. But ukipeana mtu akichukua, lakini wewe usichukue ingine. I don't know, ukienda kununua mkate na kuna 200 na unanunua mkate moja, I don't know how you are going to do it. But Kenyans don't have money. But those who have it, please reduce interaction with money, because that's how it will spread. If you wash your hands, someone doesn't wash their hands and they give you the money back. Yeah, this hand gives you the money. They've touched it already. You give it someone, because there's nothing which circulates in this country faster than money. So I think how we are going to deal, I don't know how we are going to deal with that, but I find it very strange. Then avoid congressional meetings, weddings, malls, nightclubs, churches, limitations of visits to hospitals. I agree fully. And yesterday, I'm very sorry. My wife liked going to church. And yesterday, I told her my kids are not going to church. And even her. But she told me for her, she has to go to church. And I was in a dilemma. How do I stop her from going to church? But again, my kids, I told them they're not going to church, and they didn't go. Hospitals. We have several cases in hospitals. People going to see their sick ones. Yeah. Most hospitals don't even provide food to the patients. So in most cases, people normally visit, unapeleka uji, unapeleka vitu za kuoga. But now, how are they going to restrict that? Because ideally, that's the best, because hospital is high risk area. You don't know the patient next to your patient. So it's a high risk area. So I think this one, the government can enforce. I'm seeing Kisumu, where the healthcare system has really collapsed, but I'm seeing they're doing so much, at least as far as coronavirus is concerned. They've put water available, sanitizers available, so anybody entering the hospitals must wash their hands with soap, with sanitizers, clean, then you get in. So I think those kind of measures are good, but the best is just to reduce the number of visitors to the hospitals. I think that's the last one. Ama kuna ingine, let me just check kama bado kuna ingine. Don't panic. I'm glad a friend of mine shocked me that he had this virus. Is in the United States of America. He shocked me that he had this virus for the last 21 days. But it's now recovered, because I was calling him sometimes in the middle of last week. We couldn't speak, couldn't receive. So he was telling me yesterday that he was sick. He had the virus, but at least I'm a pona. And even told me another friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours also, was also affected by the virus. So it's serious, but he told me that it's something which is manageable, but the pain, the fever are just too much to bear, but manageable if. So people should not panic. People should not panic, but they are high-risk people. People with low immunity are at high risk. But again, in this world, we must face these challenges. Yeah, I don't know what you think. What are your opinions? Especially on the president's directive yesterday. And by the way, my next video is going to be politics. The deputy president once again missed that particular function. What's happening? Thank you guys, and please May you have a good day.